You're not going to want to miss the next episode of the AI Show where we talk all about Azure AI Content Understanding. Getting started with my friend Vinod Kurpad. Make sure you tune in. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the AI Show. We're talking all about Azure AI Content Understanding with my friend Vinod Kurpad, the Getting Started edition. How you doing, my friend?
Great, Seth. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you've been on before. I think we've talked about similar things. Before we get into the content, pun intended, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a product manager. I work on the Azure AI Services part. I am responsible for a few different services we work on, doc intelligence, content understanding, a few vision services as well. So we got a portfolio of things that we work on within Azure AI Services, essentially helping customers get the most out of their investments in AI.
I love it. So we've talked about document intelligence before. Is content understanding like the V next of it, or is it something else? Why don't you tell us about what it is and what problems it solves?
Yeah, so content understanding started actually from document intelligence, right? So when we were looking at what we're seeing with document intelligence, there was a really clear pattern we saw. Customers were using doc intelligence to parse out their documents, then send that down to an LLM, ask some questions, send in a few prompts along with the content extracted, get the outputs they wanted, right? We see two clear patterns in this. One is RAG, and then the other is automation, right? So in RAG, it's essentially the analogy I'll give you is in RAG, you've always got a standard set of documents or content that you're working with, and the queries are going to be different, right? So you're asking different queries, different people are coming in and asking different questions, but it's always pretty much a static set of content. Automation is sort of the opposite, right? Where you have a defined set of inputs that you're trying to capture, and your content might be varying. So you might get different ways that the documents or content is represented, and you're trying to capture that exact same defined schema output that you need. So there's two clear patterns that we see in terms of how customers were using this. And what we were really working on is to say, how do we ensure that we can produce the best possible output for both of these patterns using a unified service where we can take a lot of the work that customers have to do for themselves and then just combine that into a single unified service. And that's essentially where content understanding came from. So it's an extension to what we do with Doc Intelligence by adding in the large language model capabilities, but it's also a sort of V next of what you think about what document intelligence can do for you today.
No, that makes sense. So is this for like Word docs? I'm trying to remember what kind of inputs content understanding what document intelligence had and now what content understanding has. Is it just like Word docs and PDFs? Tell us about what kind of content it can analyze.
Oh, that's a great question. So content understanding is really intended to take that exact pattern and make it multimodal. So it's not just Word docs, it's not just PDFs, it's Word docs, PDFs, images, audio, video, and we're going to continue to expand on the formats of or content types that we support. So it's unifying that process for you, so you have one single pane of glass to work with, and you can just get the outputs that you want in order to perform whatever you need to do it next.
I see. So this is actually way more than what we talked about before, where it was able to extract things out of documents. Now it's able to extract things out of any kind of file content thing. Am I right there, or am I missing something?
Exactly. I mean, I have a few videos and a few demos that I could also show you. So you're spot on, right? So think about this. The enterprise today, it's not just audio, it's not just documents, it's not just audio, it's not just video. It's every one of these modalities, right? And how do you ensure that you can create the best possible output across all of these things is essentially where the market is moving today. That's what you need, and that's what we're trying to build for you in content understanding.
This makes a lot more sense. All right. So you said you brought some demos to show us. Can we take a look?
So what you see here is a Foundry AI Foundry experience that we're working on. Again, yeah, content understanding is a set of APIs. You're going to use this as a way to automate your processes, get the outputs that you want. The Foundry is really the getting started experience of how you could define those analyzers, as well as how you can test it out and validate that things look right. So let's go through this workflow. I'll show you really quick what we're doing. You go ahead and you create a new project within the AI Foundry. Now you're going to see content understanding available for you here in the left nav, right? So along with all the other things that you can do within the Foundry, you can now work with content understanding as well. The first thing you're going to do when you do that is you're going to so let me just show you what this might look like, right? So I came in here, I created a new project. I get a content understanding workflow that shows you all the different things that we can do for you, right? So you can produce an output that you need for RAG, you can work on media analytics, you can work on invoice processing, post-call analytics, and so on, right? So the easiest way to get started, go ahead, create a new custom analyzer. Once you create a custom analyzer, it's going to ask you to define a schema, and you're off and running, right? So the key thing that you have to think about here is you're defining the schema. So you get to decide what you want to extract from all these all the content you're processing. In this example, I've got a invoice, and I'm using one of the newer capabilities that we just released, which is essentially the pre-built invoice model. Now, if you've been a Doc Intelligence customer in the past and you've used Doc Intelligence, you'll say, well, Doc Intelligence has a pre-built model as well for invoices and it worked really well, right? And it does. This one is slightly different in the sense that it does one additional thing that a lot of customers were asking us for, which we really couldn't quite accomplish with Doc Intelligence, which is the ability for you to customize this schema, right? So now you can extract all the fields that the invoice pre-built produces, but you can also add your fields. So for example, if you had an invoice that looked something like this, and there was a particular column in here that is not in the schema that's defined, you can go ahead and add that into your invoice as a new field. And now you've got a new capability that you can extend this invoice to produce the output that you really need, right? So the process is pretty simple. You've defined your schema. You go ahead and you test your analyzer. Then
Before you
this,
go there, can we go
yeah.
back one tab? I wanted to ask you a
Oh
question.
yeah.
So I remember before, didn't you have to like kind of have to like tell it where on the form it was before? Or you just literally have to, all you have to do is literally just tell it the schema and that's it.
Great question, Seth. So thank you for asking that question, right? So if you think about where we are today, with Doc Intelligence, with custom models, you had to label every single sample that you wanted to bring in to your labeling experience, right? And you had to label every single thing. With content understanding, we've moved forward significantly, and we recognize that there's certain fields that when you define the fields, you absolutely don't need to label them, right? So with content understanding, we're moving to an experience where you label only the things that you need corrections on, not the things that are obvious that the model already knows how to figure out. So you just define your schema. We extract the values that you're looking for, and once we've extracted those values, you then have the option to say, oh, by the way, this billing address, the value that you extracted was not quite right. I expected this address instead of that address as the billing address, and that's the little labeling experience that you have to go through, but that's only in instances where you actually need to correct what the output was that we generated for the first time.
And this is way better. Like I'm just realizing this is way better than I remember having before, where we had to tell it it's here, it's here, it's here. Now you just say, I want this information from this thing. Get to work. Oh, you made a you flubbed a little. Let me fix that for you. And that's all that is to it now.
Exactly, right. And I'll give you a couple of other things as well that are new and only recent additions to what we've done, right? So when you're defining a new field, for example, you give it a new name. It could be something in the invoice. Let's just say it's a new field called uh, tax code, maybe, right? I don't know if this is real, but if there's a field called tax code, right? And this description field is interesting too, right? Because what the description does is it allows you to tell us what you think needs to be extracted, right? So I could use this as sort of a meta prompt and say, oh, the tax code is always going to be the 4-digit code or 4-letter code next somewhere in the tax section of the document, right? So that would be an example of how I could use the description to guide the model to say, like, go use that information in this particular section to go find me the answer that I'm looking for. Um, and then
That's
the
before you go,
yeah,
I just
yeah.
that's really cool because that's like, I don't know. That's really cool. When I was a kid, right, I stuffed envelopes for a lawyer once. I imagine there's other jobs where you have to like find a thing and underline it and type into Excel. Like
Yeah,
this will do that for you, so you don't have to do that tedious work.
exactly, right. And you're just telling it what you want, and it goes and does this for you.
Okay,
The
so
other
that was you went over that part really fast. This is super cool. I love that. What's next?
So the other part that is interesting is this new field that this new method capability that we're adding in. It's been available in some of the other modalities, but for documents we've not had this capability, and it's this ability for you to now generate and classify fields, right? So let me give you this example, right? It's a contract. You're trying to identify like whether a clause is a force majeure clause or not, right? And so you can say, like, take any span of text and say classify it, and then classify it as one of these 4 classes. It's either a force majeure clause, it's a early termination clause, or it's other, right? And now you're classifying the output within the content of the document, and you're generating a brand new field that is nothing about what was present in the document, but you're generating some new information about new metadata about this document. Then you can,
That's
yeah.
amazing. I'm sorry. It is that's real because it's I don't know. Like sometimes Vinod, man, you undersell your stuff all the time because sometimes, like, I look at this stuff, like, and I'm looking at a form here, but I'm thinking like, I can make this thing read my emails and tell me who sent it, what they wanted, and what's going on, and
Yeah.
it could literally summarize my life as in my inbox because it's a dumpster fire in there, and it could do this with any kind of document, correct?
Exactly, right? And
Okay,
so that generate field is exactly what you just described, right? So I could generate a new field and I could call it summary and I could give it a generate type, in which case it's not going to try to extract any information from the document. It's just going to read the entire document and it's going to generate the summary. And you can again, use the description field to guide the summary to say like for example, in your email scenario, you might say, hey, summarize this email and only tell me about the things that are action items that I should be aware of, right? Um, and that should just generate a task specific summary for you, which is to say like, okay, what do I as Seth really care about?
that's cool. All right, so what's next? Once you define the schema, I kind of cut
Yep.
you off when you went to the test analyzer. Let's keep going forward here.
Yeah. So the test analyzer, think of it as nothing more than just a way for you to validate the outputs that we're going to generate, right? So you go through this process, you validate that everything looks good. In this case, I'm going to analyze this particular invoice. It's going to produce a set of results. We'll just take another one as well. We'll run analysis on this as well. And you'll see that as you do this, you're going to get an output that is essentially all of the fields that we extracted from this invoice. All right. So now you're going to see a couple things, right? First is you're going to see the outputs from the invoice, which is here's the fields that we extracted. Here's the confidence score for each of these values that we extracted, right? This is where the sort of magic starts to happen, right? In addition to these confidence scores, which you can use to determine if you need a human review or not, right? So that's the core value that we produce with confidence scores. Is if you were to use a LLM for yourself and just send this invoice and say extract these fields for me, the LLM would do a pretty good job. But how do you know which ones are the ones that you really want to focus on as the errors versus which ones are the ones that are really good? So it's an all or nothing world. And as you think about where content understanding differs, it's that ability for you to then get that tunable confidence scores that allow you to get to the ones that you really need to care about as the potential errors.
Yeah, and that's cool. And for example, how would you tell it to, like, if the confidence was low, or how do you do the fixes? Are the fixes here? How do you make those fixes that you talked about earlier?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. Great question. So essentially, all I'd do is I'd come in here, I'd upload files, and then I'd basically select a set of files from here that I wanted to upload. I'd have
Mhm.
maybe a few sample invoices that I know are problematic. I'd go ahead and auto label those. When you auto label an invoice, it essentially runs the existing analyzer on that, and it tells you like these are the current results we can get, right? And you can go ahead and then you can then edit those, and you can then say like, well, in this particular value, I wanted this span of text here versus this one, and that's essentially the output that we're going to take from the labeling process and drive that back into our model improvement process to then improve the overall quality of the analyzer as it improves over time.
The other sneaky thing that you said, like, really fast, and I want to
Yeah.
make sure that we don't jump over it, is you said that it was using LLMs, but you sneakily said it like really. Tell me more about that part.
Yeah. So look, the world is moving towards an LLM first inference model, right? So we're all, if you look at what agents are doing, if you look at what workflows are doing, if you look at what RAG is, it's all about maximizing the ability for you to get the LLM to do the most effective task for you, right? Within content understanding, that's sort of the ethos that we're building towards, is to say we understand that there's a variety of these workloads that customers have where it can be painful, right? You have to go through this whole chunking, embedding, and like figuring out like which chunk is the right chunk. If you ask a question and you get the answer back from three separate chunks, which one of those chunks is the most meaningful answer to take back, and why? There's a lot of challenges that you can go through, and in a really simple document like this, like what I have on the screen, it may not be obvious, but when you get into more complex content types, it becomes a huge challenge. And that's essentially where content understanding is sort of targeted to, right? Is to say, we just make this super simple for you to say, I need to use an LLM, I need to get this particular content type as an input, and I want this particular output, make it happen. And then once it's done, you just say, okay, now run this on a million documents or run this on 100,000 documents, whatever that is that you're trying to do.
I love it. And so the next thing I want to talk about
Yeah.
is you said it could do multimodality, and I see a tab there that says video analysis. Can we
Yeah.
go there and then let's see if we can get folks some call to actions to actually see how they can get started.
Yeah. So again, right, the way to do this is in the Foundry. Go create a new project. You should see content understanding in there. start with the content that you want to work with. So I'm going to call out Joe, who's a PM on our team, and Joe's actually built a little video of himself here. I can actually hit play and see. So Joe's showing you in this video. Joe's showing you how to use one of these letters. As I don't even know what they're technically called, right? But think of the scenario of there's a ton of customers out there that have videos of their products, unboxing, working with their particular product, like helping their support teams sort of use a particular product. And there's a lot of these videos out there. Now, how do you make the maximum use of these videos to then answer questions that your customers have, right? So in this particular example, I've got a video that I'm using here. You can see I've just defined two simple fields. One is describe, which is describe the equipment. And then here I'm just saying create step-by-step instructions, right? And you can see in my field description, I'm saying create step-by-step instructions on how to use this equipment safely, right? So if you go look at the outputs, you'll see that we're able to take that video in, analyze that video, and then generate both the description that is a more generic description of what this video is about, and then the step-by-step instructions as well to say like, hey, here's the step-by-step instructions on how you can go about doing this. As part of the output, you also get the transcript of all of the spoken words and where they are. So you can also take this same input and generate two specific outputs, right? One for a RAG-like process that says like anybody have any questions about any of the equipment we have, here's content that you can use to try to answer those questions. Or you can just generate a FAQ-like document like what I'm doing on the right here, which is essentially the step-by-step instructions.
This is really cool because it was effectively exactly the same thing as before,
Mhm.
but with a super more complex kind of, at least to my feeling, a super more complex document, and it all just worked the same way.
Yeah, if you think about like the challenges with video, right? What we're trying to solve is really like all that frame rate, all of those like packing of all of those frames in, aligning up the audio and the video, making sure that you send both of those informations in, both of those components in at the right time for the large language model or the Gen AI model to extract the right values that you need. And then eventually, if you think about it, it's like also describing the actions, right? Like making sure that you can produce the output that you want. Like if, for example, if there's Joe ends up like raising the ladder up in this video, you can also say like what are the actions that Joe performed in this video, and it would say like, oh, Joe raised the ladder up, and then he like lowered it down, and all the other things that you might need from it.
So this is all amazing. Where can people go to find out more, my friend?
So Azure AI Content Understanding, there's a docs page. Go ahead, check that out. It's the what's new in Azure AI Content Understanding. We keep that updated with all of the updates that we're making. We're going to be throwing out a lot more content for build. There's going to be some amazing new stuff that we're working on that is all going to be showing up pretty soon. So please do go check that out. We also have a video series that is essentially a getting started series. It shows you a few different things. Some of the things that I shared with you today, there's some additional things like a post-call analytics scenario that Jan built out, which is essentially taking a very common scenario for every single call center out there to say, I've got all these audio recordings. How do I get the insights that I care about from these? And that's a great way for you to get started with all of the things that we're doing within content understanding.
Well, it's always a pleasure. You always come on here and surprise me with like the coolest stuff that people don't usually think about. Thanks for being with us, my friend.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Seth.
And thank you so much for watching. We're learning all about Azure AI Content Understanding, the Getting Started edition with my friend Vinod Kurpad. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care.